Alright. Background image is Warm Mission Dreamy Stars of Orion from the Spitzer Space Telescope. Not the biggest fan of that title. It seems a little wordy and odd, but beautiful image. Really is a beautiful image. Anyway, this video, resource diversification. Why am I talking about it? Because we recently ran into it here. The power went out here for a few days. For us, it's already back. Great. I wouldn't be recording this video if it wasn't back. But for some people in the area, it will be more than a week even before they can get power. That's how bad it is here. Now, fortunately, for my household at least, we're actually pretty good. We're actually pretty good because yes, we lost power, but we also use natural gas in the house, so we have a stove that's fully functional. We just need a match or a striker to ignite the gas, and we're good. We can cook, and did cook. We could also boil water. There was no boil alert, so we were fine there. But it's we could do that. Our hot water heater is gas fired, so we still had hot showers even. Not specifically relevant because it's summer here, but the furnace is also gas fired, so it's because of that diversification of our resources, diversification of energy, we were good. We were still in an emergency, but it was less urgent because of that diversification. And that is something that when you're designing a spaceship or space station, even in science fiction, you do want to consider. You don't want to be like, oh, well, I've come up with this wonderful, amazing power source for this ship, and it'll allow us to explore the galaxy, because somebody's going to ask the question of, what if it fails? And if your answer isn't, well, we've got these backups, or, well, we've got this completely different power system that'll at least get you some way to get fixed. If you don't have those answers, and it's so then, I might be being like, so is part of the story going to be that thing breaks, and they have to figure out what to do? I mean, I'm not entirely sure what this video is going to count as necessarily. I guess in a way, it's how to write a story, how to write some science fiction instead of just, hey, what are the things that go into a space station, spaceship design? So let's build a spaceship, not space station. It's relevant for both. This topic is relevant for both, but let's build a spaceship. That you want to have that diversification design because things go wrong. So try to make sure you don't have single points of failure. It still is possible that might not be escapable. And it's I do describe for the Nancy Grace, technically also the Catherine, which are the two main ships in my Catherineverse thus far. They're both basically just operating on electricity. They store their energy by different means, so there is diversification there. But they're still completely reliant on electricity. They don't have natural gas or something like that. And there's energy storage, not even energy generation. But it makes sense for them because the Nancy Grace basically always goes between 2 points, and both are able to recharge it, so it's fine. And it has more energy storage than it needs to go between those. So in the event of an emergency that it needs to go off somewhere else, it's still fine. But the Catherine, though, that actually does do exploration to a degree, and it's it does visit worlds that there's nothing there. But I describe in there a way for it to power itself, recharge itself by visiting a star. And it's well, it's always going to planets. It's going between planets. It'll stop at space stations as well, but for months it might only go to planets which are orbiting a star. So it's still it always has a gas station to go to. So it doesn't need as much diversification because you're diversified outside of the ship as well. You don't need a car to have a diverse means of fueling itself. If you have a diversity, and plethora really would be a better term there, of gas stations to fill it. And it's that kind of thing. So it's you want that kind of diversity so that an emergency can be less urgent. That's kind of, I could end this video here, but I'm going to keep going because I don't want it to be less than 5 minutes. So let's see if we can get to 7. Yeah, I guess one example for diversity that actually was relevant for me is right here. Book, e-reader. I was in the middle of actually reading a print book, not mine. I don't need to read my own books. I can, and I do occasionally, but not so often. I was reading through The Lord of the Rings, and I do actually have a copy of that print. It's over there, and I finished it, but also on an e-reader. And it's well, the e-reader is really nice, but if I can't charge it, then I can't read. But the physical book I can, so long as I have the light to read by, which there's a star right there that helps. At least I think it's there. I don't, there's a wall there actually. But also, light sources, like flashlights. And I did use it to keep reading in some cases because you need to entertain yourself, but diversity of entertainment is helpful. It's also radio, because that, since that's just broadcast, again, you just need batteries and boom, you've got either people talking or you've got music. So it's, again, diversification, very helpful there. Now I'm just thinking, because I already have that, deep comm system. I think I did allow that there would be some kind of radio on there, but it's a small portion. But in theory, yeah, somebody could, hey, we lost power, but we got a radio here with batteries in it. Well, we can listen to the radio that way. I'm now just trying to think, was there anything more with the spaceship design? Well, I guess, okay. So the Nancy Grace and the Catherine, both, as I said, they visit basic gas stations regularly, so it's not a problem for them. What about a ship that does have to go out exploring, where they can't rely on being able to get to a power source readily? Well, then yes, they would have to carry their own power sources. In fact, in A Letter from Catherine, one is described that it was nuclear-powered with nuclear fission. It's not specified if that ship also has mass energy storage capabilities. It could potentially, but they would drain. That ship has been adrift for a long time. But there's also the possibility of having a ship that's nuclear fusion powered, as well as fission, because that's actually in the energy generation video. I think energy generation should get you there. There should be an energy generation and energy storage video. I just am blanking on if those names are correct. But I do talk about how in there, nuclear fission is a lot more reliable than fusion, because fission happens. It's spontaneous. Fusion is stimulated. You have to pump energy in. That's how that's an example of where, yeah, you need diversification, because if you don't have the power for fusion, like if you haven't run it recently enough to ignite itself again, you're dead. But fission, it just happens. You just need to monitor the control rods, control its rate, and you're good. But you can have both then. So massive amounts of power with fusion, but it's unreliable. Fission, not necessarily as much power as fusion, but it's very reliable. Diversity. In theory, you could have diversity for engine types, though that's something I don't really get into. It's more like they just have a whole bunch of the engines, so if one fails, they got others. They got backups. Which is still a form of diversification. Warp field emitters. The Nancy Grace and Catherine, that class of ship, actually has a whole bunch. Mini units that all work together. So there's diversification there again, of the backup variety. Other ships could have multiple warp field emitters on them. I haven't really thought about ships that large yet. In that kind of detail. Smaller ships, though, would have just one, because these are also going to be shorter range ships anyway, so if there is an emergency, you would call for help anyway. We've actually hit 8 minutes. But that's still worth considering, the idea of, well, the use of the ship doesn't demand such diversification. It would even be inappropriate, because a small ship, it would be like having a backup engine for a sedan. No, it makes the car too big, it makes the car too expensive. No one would buy it. It would be useless. Whereas having just one engine that is as reliable as it can be, and then tow trucks when you need it, that's more reasonable. So sometimes diversification does have to give way to practicality, but it still is. When writing a story, when designing and building a spaceship, hence let's build a spaceship, stop and consider, can you diversify, and is it worth diversifying? And chances are, it probably will be in many cases. Because, as I said, an emergency can happen, but how urgent is it? If you can find ways to reduce the urgency, great. If those ways get really impractical, well, then I guess it's going to be an urgent emergency. But you still do what you can to mitigate. Alright. Hey, under 10 minutes. I'm getting better at this. Maybe not. We'll see with the next one. See you then.